My name is Sarah Mitchell. I am 32 years old. My family betrayed me by siding with my husband's girlfriend, crushing my sense of belonging in a single heart-wrenching moment. The devastation hit like a wave, leaving me hollow and questioning every bond I'd ever trusted. It happened at my father-in-law's birthday dinner in our backyard in Austin, Texas, the air thick with the smell of barbecue as everyone gathered around the long, wooden table under string lights. My husband leaned forward, his voice steady and cold, announcing that Ava deserved an apology from me for questioning her ideas at work, or he'd make sure my role in the company suffered. My father-in-law nodded slowly, agreeing it was time for me to be more supportive of the family, while my sister-in-law chimed in sharply, saying I was the one causing all the unnecessary drama. The words stabbed deep, a mix of shock and raw hurt surging through me as I realized they valued his happiness over mine, but I kept my face calm, quietly deciding right then to slip away after dessert and start packing my things without a word. Yet as I excused myself to the kitchen, pretending to fetch more drinks, I knew their casual dismissal had ignited something unbreakable inside me. If you've ever felt your own family turn against you like this, how did you find the strength to stand your ground? I'd love to hear in the comments. It might help someone else going through the same pain. Before all this unfolded into the mess it became, I need to take you back a bit so you understand how we got here, because these things don't just explode out of nowhere. They build slowly, like pressure in a fault line you don't see until the ground shakes. I met my husband when we were both in our mid-20s, fresh out of grad school, and full of that optimistic energy where you think hard work and shared dreams can conquer anything life throws at you. He was studying business administration, always the one with big ideas about innovating in the tech space, while I came from a background in data analysis, spending long nights crunching numbers and building models that could predict outcomes in ways most people never bothered to question. We connected over late-night coffees in the university library, talking about how we could combine his vision with my practical skills to create something meaningful, maybe a startup that focused on sustainable tech solutions for everyday problems. Austin was the perfect place for it back then, with its growing scene of entrepreneurs and that laid-back vibe that made you feel like anything was possible if you just hustled smart. We got married a couple years later in a simple ceremony at a local park, surrounded by friends who cheered us on, and for a while it felt like we were unstoppable partners in every sense of the word. That's when we started the company together, not as some power couple chasing fame, but as two people who genuinely believed in making a difference through better software for environmental tracking. I handled the back-end analytics, ensuring our algorithms were solid and ethical, while he took the lead on pitching to investors and building the team. It wasn't glamorous at first, just us in a rented office space, downtown, surviving on takeout and adrenaline, but we grew it steadily, landing our first big client after I refined a data model that saved them thousands in resource waste. Looking back, those early days were the best, when success felt shared, and our home life blended seamlessly with work. Late evenings debating strategies over wine on our porch. But as the company expanded, hiring more people and moving to a sleek building in the tech district, things started shifting in ways I didn't catch. At first subtle, at the beginning, like a distant rumble you dismiss as nothing. Introducing the key people in this story makes sense here, because they all played parts in how it unraveled. My husband, David Foster, was the charismatic face of it all, the one who could charm a room full of skeptics into believers. His father, William Mitchell, had been an early investor, a retired engineer who saw potential in our ideas and provided that crucial startup capital without too many strings attached, at least initially. Then there was Ava Thompson, who joined as a marketing executive about 3 years in bringing flashy presentations and a network of contacts that promised rapid growth. She was younger, always perfectly put together, with that effortless confidence that turns heads. And at first, I appreciated her energy, thinking it complemented what we were building. But over time, I noticed how she gravitated toward my husband, their meetings running longer, her ideas getting fast-tracked, without the scrutiny I applied to everything else. I didn't suspect anything personal right away. I was too focused on keeping our projects grounded in real data, not hype. To add some context to the family side, my sister-in-law, Emily Foster, had always been close to her brother, living just a few neighborhoods away in Austin and often dropping by for dinners or company events. She worked as a real estate agent, sharp and opinionated, the type who could sell a house in a day, but also stir up tension with a single comment if she felt someone was out of line. Emily never fully warmed to me, treating me more like an addition to the family rather than a core part, but we kept it civil for everyone's sake. On the work front, I had a reliable colleague named Tom Harris, our lead developer, who'd been with us from the early days, someone I could count on for honest feedback when things fell off. And then there was my close friend Lisa Jenkins, a therapist I met through a local networking group. She wasn't involved in the business, but became my sounding board as cracks started showing, offering insights that helped me see patterns I might have ignored otherwise. The changes crept in gradually, the way erosion shapes a landscape without you noticing until a piece breaks away. Success brought more attention, articles featuring my husband as the innovative leader, invitations to conferences where he'd speak on panels about scaling tech startups. He'd come home buzzing with new buzzwords like disruption and pivot, phrases that sounded exciting but often masked shortcuts I worried about in our core products. I remember one evening after a long day reviewing code for a new app feature, suggesting we stick to our original mission of sustainability over quick profits, and he brushed it off with a laugh, saying I was too cautious, that we needed to think bigger to compete. It stung a little, but I chalked it up to stress, not realizing it was the start of him pulling away, valuing flash over substance. Ava's influence grew. Around then, her proposals filled with bold visuals and promises of viral marketing campaigns that looked great on paper, but often overlooked the technical feasibility I insisted on checking. In meetings, she'd present with that polished flair, and my husband would nod along, overriding my concerns with comments like, "Sarah's just being thorough, but let's move forward." It felt dismissive, turning my expertise into an afterthought, and soon, decisions were happening without my input, emails looping me in after the fact. At home, our conversations shortened the easy intimacy, fading into polite updates about the day, his phone buzzing more often with messages he dismissed as work. I tried talking about it once over breakfast, on our sunny kitchen table, asking if everything was okay between us, and he assured me it was just the pressure of growth, but his eyes didn't meet mine the way they used to. The real turning point came about 6 months before that disastrous birthday dinner, when I stumbled upon the truth in a way that left no room for denial. I'd come back early from a conference in Dallas, hoping to surprise him with his favorite Tex-Mex from that spot downtown, but as I walked through the front door of our house in the suburbs, I heard voices from the living room, hers light and laughing, mixed with his in a tone too intimate for colleagues. I froze in the hallway, registering her jacket on the coat rack, a wine glass with her shade of lipstick on the coffee table, details that pieced together like a puzzle I didn't want to solve. Instead of storming in, I backed out, quietly drove to a nearby park, and sat on a bench under the oak trees, letting the facts sink in without the chaos of confrontation. In my line of work, when data points to a flaw, you don't argue with it. You adjust accordingly, and that's what I did, deciding not to waste energy on accusations that would only give him time to spin excuses. From there, I shifted into protection mode, documenting inconsistencies at work, not out of spite, but to safeguard what I'd built if things went south. Odd expenses, rushed approvals on Ava's campaigns that bypassed standard reviews, things that could raise flags if audited. Meanwhile, I started exploring options discreetly, reaching out to contacts about potential roles elsewhere, but then my father-in-law pulled me aside during a family lunch, hinting at expanding our operations to the West Coast, maybe a satellite office in Seattle, where the focus could stay on innovation without the corporate noise. He said it with a knowing look, as if he'd sensed the tensions brewing, and I latched onto it as a lifeline, working behind the scenes to make it viable without alerting anyone else. Emily, my sister-in-law, picked up on something during those months, cornering me at a company happy hour one evening with her usual directness, asking why I seemed so distant lately, implying I was the one creating problems by not embracing change. Her words carried that undercurrent of loyalty to her brother, making it clear where she'd stand if lines were drawn, and it only reinforced my need for an exit strategy. Tom, my colleague, became an unwitting ally when I confided bits and pieces during a late night debugging session, offering to help refine the proposal for the Seattle branch without asking too many questions. And Lisa, my friend, listened over coffee meetups, reminding me that staying in a situation that diminished me wasn't strength, it was surrender. By the time my father in law's birthday rolled around, the pressure had built to a breaking point, though on the surface, everything looked normal as we set up the backyard with tables grilling ribs and corn, while country music played softly from the speakers. My husband had been distant all week, canceling our usual date night with vague excuses about deadlines, and I sensed something big was coming, but I didn't expect it to unfold right there amid the laughter and clinking glasses. As dessert was served pecan pie from his favorite bakery, he cleared his throat, drawing everyone's attention, and laid it out plainly. Ava was more than a colleague. She was someone special, and my resistance to her at work was making things difficult for everyone. My father-in-law sighed, but didn't object, murmuring something about modern relationships and needing to adapt for the family's sake, while Emily jumped in with a pointed glare at me, saying I'd been selfish, that an apology to Ava would smooth everything over and keep the company stable. The betrayal landed like a punch, their collective agreement hanging in the air, as if my years of dedication meant nothing compared to his choices. I felt the ground tilt, a surge of isolation washing over me, but I didn't explode. Instead, I nodded quietly, excusing myself to grab water, my mind already racing toward the transfer papers I'd prepared. What they didn't realize was that their unity against me had just sealed my resolve to step out of their shadow for good. The rest of the evening blurred into forced smiles and small talk. Me playing the part, while inside plans solidified, contacting Tom later that night to finalize the Seattle move, looping in Lisa for emotional backup as I prepared to untangle my life from theirs. As the party wound down, guests trickling out under the Texas stars, I wondered how long it would take them to notice the shift. But for now, the suspense of my unspoken departure hung like a secret weapon ready to change everything. That night, after the last guest had driven off and the backyard fell quiet under the Austin moonlight, I slipped upstairs to our bedroom while my husband helped my father-in-law clean up the remnants of the party. My hands steady, despite the adrenaline, I pulled out the hidden folder from under the mattress transfer documents for the Seattle office, already signed off by a few key board members who'd seen the value in my expansion pitch weeks ago. Contacting Tom felt like the first real breath I'd taken all evening. I messaged him from my phone in the dark, asking if he could push through the final logistics by morning, and he responded almost immediately with a thumbs up and a quick note saying he'd handle the tech setup remotely to avoid any flags. Lisa got a call next, her voice a steady anchor as I whispered the details from the bathroom, the faucet running to mask the sound. She didn't hesitate, offering to help me sort through what to pack and even drive me to the airport if needed, reminding me that real friends show up when family falters. By the time I hung up, my suitcase was half filled with essentials, tucked away in the closet where no one would notice until I was gone. But as I lay in bed pretending to sleep, my husband sliding in beside me with a casual goodnight, the weight of their earlier words pressed down a silent reminder that this wasn't just about leaving a marriage. It was about escaping a web where my own contributions had become invisible, overshadowed by his choices and their blind support. The next morning brought the first wave of escalation, disguised as a family brunch at my father-in-law's house just across town, the kind of gathering that used to feel warm, but now carried an undercurrent of expectation. My sister-in-law arrived early, bustling into the kitchen with a tray of fresh muffins, her smile too bright as she pulled me aside and said pointedly, "You know, Sarah, Sometimes you have to swallow your pride for the greater good. Ava's not going anywhere, and fighting it just makes you look bitter. Her tone dripped with that faux concern, like she was doing me a favor by spelling out my supposed flaws, and it twisted something inside me, but I nodded vaguely, stirring my coffee to avoid her gaze. My father-in-law chimed in from the living room, calling out that the company needed unity, now more than ever implying my reluctance was the real threat to stability. His words landing like subtle jabs that questioned my loyalty without outright accusation. My husband sat across from me at the table, piling eggs onto his plate, as if nothing had shifted, but when the conversation turned to work plans, he leaned in with that CEO confidence, suggesting I reach out to Ava personally to clear the air before the next team meeting his eyes, locking on mine with an edge that dared me to push back. The room went quiet, waiting for my response, and I felt the isolation deepen their collective stare, a form of pressure that made my chest tighten, no one acknowledging the betrayal, just framing it as my problem to fix. I murmured something noncommittal about thinking it over, but inside the resentment built a quiet fury at how they'd rewritten the narrative to protect him at my expense. As brunch wrapped up, my sister-in-law hugged me a little too tightly at the door, whispering that family sticks together, no matter what, her words laced with the sarcasm of someone who knew exactly where the lines were drawn. Driving home alone, my husband staying behind to discuss business with his father, the silence in the car amplified everything, my mind replaying their dismissals like a loop that fueled my determination. I stopped at a coffee shop downtown, using the time to email the board about accelerating the Seattle timeline, attaching data projections that highlighted how the move would benefit long-term growth without the distractions here. Tom replied within minutes, confirming he'd loop in the necessary contacts and even offering to cover my current projects during the transition. His support a stark contrast to the family's gaslighting. Lisa texted too, suggesting I document any further interactions in case things turned uglier, her practical advice grounding me as I realized this wasn't just emotional, it could spill into professional sabotage if they caught on too soon. Over the following week, the small violations piled up, each one chipping away at my resolve while strengthening it in equal measure. My husband started leaving work notes on the kitchen counter, passive-aggressive reminders about upcoming presentations where Ava's input was crucial, implying I'd better play nice or risk being sidelined. One evening, as we sat on the couch watching a mindless show, he turned to me with a sigh, saying, "You used to be so supportive. What happened to the team player I married?" His words cut deep, twisting our history into a weapon that made me doubt myself for a split second. But I bit back the retort, excusing myself to the office upstairs, where I finalized flight details instead. My sister-in-law amplified it with a group text to the family, sharing an article about workplace harmony, with a not-so-subtle emoji, her way of piling on without direct confrontation. Even my father-in-law joined the fray during a quick call about company finances, casually mentioning that promotions were on hold until internal issues, resolved, his voice heavy with obligation, as if guilting me into compliance was just good advice. The cumulative effect left me exhausted, sleep fractured by scenarios of what ifs, but it also clarified the path. Staying meant endless erosion of my self-worth, their emotional coercion, a trap I'd walked into blindly for years. I confided more in Lisa over lunch at a quiet cafe near Zilker Park, her listening without judgment as I unpacked the layers, and she pointed out patterns I'd missed, like how their family first mantra always seemed to exclude my needs. Tom provided another boost at work, slipping me updated org charts that showed my role in Seattle as a step-up independent from the Austin drama. His quiet alliance, a reminder that not everyone bought into the facade. By midweek, the tension peaked during a family video call my sister-in-law organized ostensibly to plan a weekend getaway, but quickly veering into interrogation territory. She started it off with a sharp question about why I hadn't apologized to Ava, yet framing it as concern for my husband's stress levels, her eyes narrowing through the screen, like she was daring me to defend myself. My father-in-law nodded along, adding that holding grudges wasn't productive. His words a velvet hammer that obligated me to concede for peace's sake. My husband piled on with a story about Ava's brilliant, recent campaign, glancing at me expectantly, the subtext clear fall in line or face the consequences. I felt the noose tighten their united front, a masterclass in gaslighting, making me question if I was overreacting. But then a message from Tom popped up on my phone transfer, approved start date in 2 weeks, and it snapped me back a hidden lifeline amid their pressure. I ended the call early with a vague excuse about a headache, my voice steady, despite the storm inside, and retreated to pack the last of my things in secret. The suspense of it all, knowing I held the cards they didn't see, kept me going. But as I hid the suitcase in the garage, a wave of loneliness hit, wondering if walking away would truly free me or just leave me adrift. That night, my husband confronted me in the kitchen, his tone laced with frustration as he demanded to know what was wrong, saying the family was worried about my attitude, his words a final jab that echoed their collective disdain. The argument escalated quickly, him accusing me of jealousy while I held back the truth, my silence a shield, as he pressed for an apology timeline. Just as I considered revealing everything, my phone buzzed with Lisa's text, "You deserve better than this cage." And it halted me, the decision crystallizing to let actions speak instead. But before I could respond, my sister-in-law called him, pulling him away with more family matters, leaving me alone with the weight of what came next hanging in the air. That argument in the kitchen marked the beginning of the end, his demands echoing off the tiled walls as he paced, insisting I owed Ava, and by extension the family, an explanation for my cold shoulder at work. I stood by the sink, gripping the counter to steady myself, his voice rising with each accusation of how my attitude was dragging everyone down, but I didn't fire back. Instead, I let him vent my mind already miles away in Seattle, where none of this would follow. When he finally stormed out to take Emily's call, slamming the door behind him, I moved quickly, grabbing my keys and heading to the garage to load the car with what I'd packed earlier, the act of quiet rebellion that felt both liberating and terrifying. The drive to Lisa's apartment that night was a blur of Austin's city lights, my phone on silent to avoid the inevitable follow-up texts, and when I arrived, she opened the door without a word, pulling me into a hug that said everything. We sat on her couch with mugs of tea, unpacking the day's events, how my family's alignment with him had turned a personal betrayal into a group verdict against me. And she listened, offering no quick fixes, but validating the hurt in a way they never had. Tom checked in via message, confirming the board had greenlit my relocation without fanfare. His support a professional tether that kept me from feeling entirely unmoored. But, as the hours ticked by, the reality settled. This move meant severing ties not just from my husband, but from the family who'd chosen sides so easily, leaving me to rebuild alone in a city where no one knew my story. Over the next few days, the coercion intensified in waves I hadn't fully anticipated, starting with a surprise visit from my father-in-law at the office, his presence in my cubicle drawing curious glances from coworkers. He sat across from me, folding his hands with that paternal air, and urged me to reconsider, saying the company and the family couldn't afford division. His words a mix of plea and command that twisted guilt into my resolve. Emily followed up with a voicemail, her tone sharp, as she accused me of overreacting, claiming Ava was just a phase, and that true family forgave her hypocrisy, stinging like salt in a wound, since she'd never once questioned her brother's actions. My husband texted relentlessly, alternating between apologies laced with blame and outright demands for a sit-down, each message a psychological jab that tested my silence, but I responded minimally, buying time as I wrapped up loose ends at work. Tom became invaluable, then helping me hand off projects during a discreet lunch meeting at a cafe near the office, where he shared his own frustrations with the shifting company culture. Under Ava's influence, his insights confirming I wasn't imagining the decline. Lisa arranged a storage unit for the rest of my things, driving with me one afternoon to drop off boxes, her encouragement, a balm against the growing isolation, as I realized how few people outside this circle I could truly lean on. The moral entrapment peaked during a tense phone call with my husband that evening, him invoking our shared history, the company we'd built, the vows we'd made, as reasons to stay and work through it. His voice cracking just enough to pull at old strings, but I hung up mid-sentence the act of boundary that left me shaking yet empowered. By the end of the week, the small violations had snowballed into outright exile, my sister-in-law spreading whispers among mutual friends about my unstable behavior, turning social circles against me with subtle manipulations that isolated me further. My father-in-law emailed a formal note about reviewing my position if personal issues persisted. The professional threat, a clear extension of family pressure, forcing me to accelerate my exit before it escalated to irreversible damage. I confided the details to Lisa over dinner at her place, the conversation revealing how deeply their control had rooted, and she suggested therapy resources in Seattle, her practicality a lifeline amid the emotional storm. Tom slipped me final documents during our last in-person chat, wishing me luck with a handshake that felt like the end of an era, his role in this, a quiet twist that highlighted loyalties beyond blood. The final rebellion came quietly, not with shouts, but with preparation, as I returned home one last time to gather the remaining essentials while my husband was at a late meeting. The house felt foreign now, echoes of happier times mocking the present, and I left a brief note on the table stating I was leaving for good, no dramatics, just facts before driving away under the cover of dusk. My phone lit up immediately, with calls from him, then Emily, their voices in voicemails, a barrage of confusion turning to anger, accusing me of abandonment without hearing their side, but I didn't answer the silence, my first true boundary. My father-in-law's message came last, a measured plea to think of the family legacy. His words, a final entrapment that I deleted without reply, the act severing the last thread. Arriving in Seattle felt like stepping into a void, the rainy streets and unfamiliar skyline, a stark contrast to Austin's warmth. My new apartment, a modest one-bedroom in a quiet neighborhood where the anonymity was both relief and ache. The office there was functional, a small team focused on core tech without the politics, and I dove in leading projects with the expertise I'd honed, but the days stretched long, the absence of familiar faces a constant reminder of what I'd lost. Tom emailed updates sporadically, noting the Austin branch's struggles, delays in launches, key clients, wavering, but I felt no vindication, only a hollow clarity that my departure had exposed cracks they'd ignored. Lisa visited once, her presence a brief anchor, but distance strained even that our calls growing shorter as life pulled us apart. News from back home filtered through indirectly mutual acquaintances, mentioning my husband's quick rebound with Ava Emily's social media posts, painting a picture of family unity that excluded me entirely. My father-in-law's health declined a quiet update via a shared contact, but no outreach came their silence, a confirmation of the exile I'd chosen. I set boundaries firmly, no responses to occasional probes, blocking numbers when needed, the isolation deepening into a lonely routine of work and solitary walks along the Puget Sound, where the gray waves mirrored my unresolved grief. Therapy helped unpack its sessions, revealing how I'd minimized myself for years to fit their mold, but healing came slow, without triumph or closure, just the quiet cost of self-preservation. In the end, walking away didn't bring rewards or justice. It left me adrift, piecing together a life stripped of the illusions that had bound me. The family I'd once clung to became ghosts, their absence a wound that scarred over time, teaching me that freedom often wears the face of loneliness. Thank you for listening to my story. It's still raw to share, but if you've had to set boundaries that left you isolated, what did okay mean for you in that moment? Share in the comments. Your words might light someone's path.